For Inside Carolina, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and you're listening to this podcast, which is a part of the Inside Carolina podcast network. On today's episode, I'm joined by my fellow Carolina football lettermen, Mike Ingersoll and EJ Wilson, to talk about Carolina's latest loss against Florida State. Before we get started, though, I just wanted to say thank you for being here. Be sure you subscribe to Inside Carolina wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube so you never miss out on any of the content the team at IC puts out. The support doesn't go unnoticed on this end. Speaking of support, we want to support the people that support us. So that's why I've got to mention our friends over at Johnny T-Shirt. When it comes to Carolina apparel, they have everything that you could possibly want. The T-shirts, the jerseys, the hats, you name it. They'll probably have it. It's great people, great customer service since it's locally owned and operated by alumni. Visit them on Franklin Street if you're going to be in Chapel Hill for a game day, or online at johnnytshirt.com. And don't forget, Inside Carolina premium subscribers get 10% off their orders. All right, as always, it's Mike Ingersoll and EJ Wilson. Guys, Carolina, for the second consecutive season, loses to Florida State as a double-digit favorite. The Tar Heels closed as a 17.5-point favorite before Saturday's game, and UNC loses 35-25 to FSU. You could have your pick of where to start, with the offense being bad, the defense is bad, the coaching is suspect, the game management is suspect. Everything is kind of off. This team has a ton of mistakes. But EJ, starting with you, what were your biggest takeaways?
My biggest takeaways is the biggest thing that I saw is that we are probably the most inconsistent team. I mean, I've never seen a team in 6 games into the season that doesn't have an identity yet. I mean, sometimes it seems like we're going to stop the run, and then it seems like we're going to stop the pass. And I mean, and I can't even say yesterday that we stopped the pass, but because they didn't have to. Every time that they wanted, they did whatever they wanted to yesterday. They ran the ball down our throat. The quarterback ran the ball. Their running backs ran the ball. They had tight end screens that were successful. So with this being the positivity pod, I don't know how much positivity there's going to be today, but I mean, and then you think about it, I mean, they had a couple of play action passes that went for either touchdowns or major yardage. So we can't say that they stopped the pass. I mean, I wouldn't pass the ball or throw the ball around if I was running the ball down somebody's throat, especially somebody who's, like we just mentioned, was a 17-point favorite coming into the game. So my biggest takeaway, my first one, is that we don't have an identity and we don't know who we are. And two, something is going on, and I think it's the time for us to start looking and talking about this coaching and the development of the players that we have on the field. We are making so many of the same mistakes that we have been making for the past 3 years across coaching staffs, across eras. Honestly, I mean, the story of yesterday, and I think, and I wrote down on one of the drives, I think it was the final drive of the game, that there was the one play where we had the guy in the backfield tackle for a loss. We took a bad angle, missed the tackle. He spun out and he got the first down. That was kind of a microcosm of the whole game. It was the bad angles that we were taking all game, the missed tackles that we had, and just the undisciplined football that we played. So my biggest takeaway is that I don't think that this program has come as far as we think that it's come, and I don't think that we have necessarily the talent that we think we have. Yes, that we do have a more talented team than we have in Carolina on paper in a while. I mean, I'm starting to feel like we're kind of like the mid-2000s Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you look at our roster from top to bottom, and it looks stacked. But when you go out there on the field, and you look at the film, it's the talent's just not showing up. The development of the players just not showing up. So overall, I just came away from this game very disappointed.
EJ, what did you enjoy more yesterday, watching the game or your stomach ulcer?
Definitely the stomach ulcer. Definitely the stomach ulcer I carried around Chapel Hill yesterday. Definitely enjoyed that more.
EJ, you mentioned Jordan Travis, his passing ability and how he threw the ball in the game. He only had 13 passing attempts, but he was 11 of 13 for 145 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. His quarterback rating, Sam Howell, I thought he played a pretty good game yesterday. He had that one ball that was pretty underthrown to Joffrey Brown. But Sam Howell's quarterback rating was still 120. Jordan Travis's quarterback rating was 254. So it's just more of the same problems for Carolina. Mike, what about you? What were your biggest takeaways from this game?
I disagree with EJ that we don't have an identity. Our identity is we can't stop running quarterbacks. That has been our identity for as long as I can remember. Yep. And it's like you said, across staffs. It's not, this isn't This is something that Mac's staff hasn't fixed, but it has existed for quite a while. So if you want to beat Carolina, just run your quarterback. It doesn't really matter how good of a runner he is either. Just run him.
Just run them.
Just run him, and you'll score points. And our defense won't tackle him, so don't worry about that. Just let him run. But on the offensive side of the ball, I just went back and I watched a condensed version of the game just to kind of rehash what I saw. It's difficult to watch. I will say this: we cleaned up a lot of twist issues. We didn't clean up all the twist issues because they got home on some twists that they shouldn't have gone home on. But for the most part, we handled it pretty well because Florida State, best I could tell, almost never gave us a straight up rush. They were running games up front the entire game, which is exactly what I would have done if I was their defensive coordinator. I would have game planned twists and stunts all day long because we hadn't shown an ability to stop it. And I will say that we did a much better job this week of stopping twists. We took that off of film. I think we'll start to see that. If we put together another game of stopping that, we might see that less and less moving forward. But it doesn't that doesn't fix the bigger problem we have, which is Sam is still getting hit. Sam's clock is still off because even when he's not getting hit, he thinks he's going to get hit. He's taken some serious licks back there in the pocket. It's not just like he's getting wrapped up and spun down. It's not those kind of sacks. It's not those kinds of quarterback hits. I mean, Jermaine Johnson yesterday came up. We were running a play action pass. It was off of a run scheme. So he was on the backside. He got chipped by the running back. He retraced and he laid Sam out. And I think it was in the fourth quarter. Maybe it was late in the third quarter. Yeah, laid Sam out. This was the play after Sam took a hit and was down on the ground. The ball came out. He was down on the ground. I think Florida State got hit with a flag on that one. The very next play, Jermaine Johnson, number 11, defensive end, who's a good player, gets Sam on his retrace. So his primary move, he gets chipped by the back. He then retraces. He's got linemen and he's got a back chasing him, and he still manages to lay Sam out as Sam's trying to escape the pocket. And Sam laid there for a minute. I mean, this kid is going to get hurt. We're 6 games into the season right now, and every time that kid drops back, I'm worried that it's a career ender. I mean, I'm legitimately concerned that Sam Howell is going to get hurt. So, positivity pod, Sam's not hurt yet. That's my positive takeaway. He's not hurt yet, and I hope to God he doesn't get hurt for his sake and for everybody's sake, particularly his draft stock. But there's going to come a point here where you're going to start seeing Sam make business decisions, and the fans aren't going to like that. But I know me and EJ are going to fully support it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing with this team, for my biggest takeaways, it's that, you could write off the Virginia Tech game as a fluke if that was just the first game of the season, hostile environment, not used to the fans being back. Okay, I understand that. Then the Georgia Tech game happens where it's the same issues popping up and it's a team that just looks lost. And then the same thing happens again yesterday against Florida State where, they have a good showing against Duke, and you're like, it's a fan base that you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, where it's like, was Duke just an inferior team, or has Carolina really improved? And this team is just showing that this is just who they are. They're not that good of a football team. They have a few good players throughout. Sam Howell, Josh Downs. You have a few players on defense here and there. Miles Murphy. I really like Javari Ritzy, what he does in his reps. But overall, this is just not a good team. Nobody has really taken this drastic leap forward that we kind of expected when you're in year 3 of an offensive system and year 3 of a defensive system, where a team like Florida State, who lost to Jacksonville State, is just imposing their will on Carolina. And it's just really disheartening football to watch. And I think when I'm on the sidelines and watching these games for Carolina, like, I'm just left feeling bad for these players because it looks like they don't know what's going on or where to kind of turn. And I did hear Jason Staples on the day after podcast where he says he thinks certain players for like Carolina defense are essentially playing like hero ball and trying to make plays. And I think there's just a lot of frustration for this team, and it's turning to people feeling like they have to go above and beyond to try to make plays or try to be the hero for the team. And then the frustration is even leading over now into these unsportsmanlike penalties.
Well, the frustration's obvious. I mean, there's no fire.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like there's no spark in the team.
Yeah.
And that's incredible for me to see. And I want to go ahead and make this very clear. I don't put that on the players 6 games into the season. That is not a player's problem. That is, from a player's standpoint, what that is I've been emotionally invested in this thing for 6 weeks. We've been up and down, and all the things that we were told if we did, we'd have success, we've done, and we haven't been successful. I don't know what else to do, like you're saying, Vip. So now I'm just frustrated. I'm completely exasperated. The team looks exasperated. The players do. And that is a leadership issue from the adult leaders in the room, from that coaching staff. And listen, I want to make this very clear. I am not a calling for coaches' jobs guy. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it now. I'm not the guy who's ever going to do that. Okay. This staff that Mac has is a good staff. All right. They've coached a lot of games. They've coached a lot of players. They've put cumulatively, they've put a lot of guys in the NFL. Many of them have played in the NFL themselves. Okay. They've gone to national championship games. They've won national championships with Mac Brown. Like they know how to coach football players. But for some reason, there is a disconnect this season. And the benefits of all that wealth of experience amongst that coaching staff is not translating to the players for some reason. And that is not the players' fault. That is not the players' problem to fix. That is the coaching staff's problem to fix. And they know it. And Mac knows it. And he'll admit it because he's a big boy. And this is a big boy staff. And they know what they have to do to improve it. All I know is that we've got 6 games left. And my concern is, look, man, I'm Irish Catholic. All right. Cynicism is like, that's just that's in my blood. When I said I thought we were going to go 1-3 in October, I was kind of not serious. I was hoping I wasn't right.
Yeah.
But I'm almost certain I'm right now.
Yeah.
And that's not something I wish I was. That's not something I want to be right about. I look at the remainder of this schedule and I have a hard time pointing out 2 games that they're going to win. They will do it. Like they will win 2 or 3 more games this season. Whether they end up winning 5 games or 6 games and go to a bowl is going to be a real test. I originally thought maybe this was an 8-4 football team. I don't think that anymore. And I'm concerned because that would be a massive step back. What I'm seeing now is that we talked about this yesterday. EJ and I were in town with some other guys. The prevailing sentiment was Michael Carter and Javonte Williams clearly masked a lot of deficiencies.
Yeah,
which is kind of what we talked about last year a little bit. Vip, we were at the tailgate. We talked about it a little bit. Like they masked a lot of deficiencies. We talked about it on the pods last season. But you would hope that now they're gone with an extra year of experience. Some of those deficiencies would have shrunk. They would have diminished a little bit. We would have filled those gaps in the off season. Players are a year older, a year better, especially with all the guys we had coming back, particularly on the offensive line. And though there may have been a drop off, it shouldn't have been as drastic a drop off as we're seeing right now. So what that tells me is you had 2 star players in that backfield. And without them, this offense cannot move. It cannot go. And Sam Howell right now is the whole offense. And that kid can't possibly do every single thing for this offense for the next 6 weeks. It's just, it's not possible from a conceptual standpoint. It's also not physically possible for him because again, he's going to get hurt. And you got to start looking out for a kid who's killed himself for this program. Like you can't put all that on him in his 3rd year. It's not acceptable. And the staff's gonna have to fix it. And again, they know they have to fix it. And they're gonna do what they think they need to do to fix it. Now, whether that actually translates into correcting the problem and correcting these deficiencies, I don't know. I do know that the effort will be there. The attempt to fix it will be there. And it remains to be seen whether it actually does get handled.
Yeah, and when you talk about Michael Carter and Javonte Williams and hiding deficiencies, I think you could also add De'Ami Brown into that conversation because
4,100 yards of offense
Big
we lost,
time.
man. Yeah,
Big
big
time.
time.
And then I also think when you were talking about when you're looking at the remaining schedule and finding possible wins, I think that's the mistake where the Carolina fan has kind of found themselves this year, where it's like, you lose to Virginia Tech and you're like, well, if Carolina can run the table, they could still make it to the ACC championship. If they lose to Georgia Tech, like, well, if Carolina runs the table, they might be able to do something. And they're not saying really that the ACC championship is possible, but I think there are still some fans who are optimistic that this team could win out. But when you're looking at what you saw on the field on Saturday, it's like, where is that belief coming from that you think this team can win out? Because the team I saw on Saturday, they're going to struggle, and every game is going to be a fight. There isn't any more games like that Miami game last year where that team just flat out was dominant and beat a team's will out of it. I just don't see that happening for this team.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mike, I want to get into the offensive line because I think after rewatching the game, I rewatched the game kind of like you mentioned. I was a bit harsh in the offensive line's performance because I think they did do a lot better job. I made a note too that they did a better job passing off the twists and they gave some time in the pass protection. The run blocking, I thought, especially in the early downs, it leaves a little room to be desired, even though Carolina's rushing for 6.4 yards per carry. But a lot of that is Sam Howell just taking off on a broken play or
it's explosive plays in the ground game. Yeah, it's chunk plays. Yeah.
So when you're looking at the overall offensive line's play, how would you evaluate the performance where they were better in some areas, but there's still some areas where they do struggle?
Again, they've taken, they take one step back, or they take one step forward and then another step back, and one step forward and another step back. It's not one forward and two back. I think they just kind of, they stay where they are. They're neutral, right? They have a net zero in terms of improvement every week. So they'll get better in one area and then they'll take a step back in another area. For example, they did a much better job in pass protection and passing off games. We've talked about that. Double teams in this game were horrendous. Like, their second level assignments were terrible. There were a few plays that we broke on the ground that were designed runs. We handed the ball off and they broke and we got some chunk yardage. But like you pointed out, most of the big gainers on the ground were Sam keeping it. And they were either designed runs or really what they were just everybody was covered downfield and he just tucked it and ran. Yeah. And also props to Sam Howell sliding. Looked like he's been doing it his whole life, didn't it? He finally figured it out. And then late in the game, he abandoned it. He said, "I'm done. Like, I'm done with the slide stuff. I need yards." So most of the rushing success was just a result of it was out of necessity. It was Sam just tucking and running in the pass. It wasn't necessarily designed runs that were really breaking, though we had a few that did. And part of the reason why we were so bad in the run game on first and second down, and we got behind the sticks, behind schedule in the run game, was because our second level assignments just weren't there. I mean, well, let me rephrase. Our assignments in terms of the human beings were there. They were usually hitting us in the mouth in the backfield. That's where they were. We were not on our assignments. We were missing them. And part of that was getting our head buried. Part of it was we weren't shoulder to shoulder in a lot of our double teams. We weren't taking the double teams vertical when they had to get vertical to a linebacker. We were trying to take them at angles, and guys were just flowing over the top and basically backdooring the play and blowing things up in the backfield. I saw that happen a few times. So there are things we got better at, twists, things we got worse at, second level assignments. We had a net zero in terms of improvement for the game. It still should have been enough to win the football game. Despite all the issues, it still should have been enough. But in an era of college football where every team can drop 40 or 50 points because the offenses were running, 25 points ain't going to get it done. So it's just the way that it is.
EJ, 6 games in, and the Carolina defense has now made 4 average to below average quarterbacks look like All-Americans. And I remember after the Georgia State game, we were here saying, like, if that Georgia State quarterback could throw, like, the Carolina defense would have been in trouble again. Mm-hmm. Jordan Travis, he rushes for 121 yards on 14 carries. Why, in your opinion, does Carolina struggle so much with the read option and with the quarterback run, and where does the responsibility lie there?
I think this week is a little bit different. Like, I mean, yesterday, of course, as Mike mentioned, we were together and we're watching the game and we're like, well, there's another quarterback that's probably going to have a career day rushing against the Tar Heel defense. But as I'm watching it today, I think that we failed to make an adjustment, honestly. I mean, we at one point, I mean, I noticed that, okay, when they're about to run this option, they have the wide receivers split out way wide. They're spreading out our defense. So of course, our defensive end or the outside linebacker, really in this offense, is crashing down, and he has the dive play. It takes me back to just principles, and that's really where I'm at now. It's like, what's really fundamentally wrong? Why can't we stop this? Because with how consistently this been, as I mentioned earlier, how this has come off across programs, across coaching staffs, this is kind of a scheme issue. This is not a player issue. So when we played Georgia Tech, we spent 2 weeks practicing without a football, focusing on our keys. We didn't practice anything against the pass. We're trying to take our chances there with us having better athletes. But we spent usually we played them around a bye week. So we spent 2 weeks literally drilling down what our responsibilities were. You get your hands on a lineman, you tackle this dive, no matter what, you tackle this dive. And honestly, like at the point we were at to where the coaches, what they demanded of us, if we had the responsibility of the dive, but we made a tackle on the quarterback if he pulled it, that was a negative play for us because we shouldn't be anywhere around that play. We're tackling the dive to the ground. So I'm seeing a lot of the stand-up defensive end / outside linebackers in our defense. They're crashing down and they're taking a dive, but when the quarterback pulls it, who's really responsible for that? On one play, I saw Eugene Asante. He's an inside linebacker. He's reading the guard. The guard made an inside step. He stepped into that gap. And I mean, yeah, he got stuck on the block a little bit, but then Jordan Travis is out of the gate. And I've seen this on so many different things. So it's like they're spreading people out. And it's like we're expecting whoever that slot corner, the nickelback or the safety to come down and to take the quarterback on that play. That's not going to work. Your outside linebacker needs to make that play. If we know that we're playing against a quarterback that's going to run the ball, if they're running a read option, then maybe we need to run something a little bit differently. When I was there and we played Georgia Tech, we were a traditional 4-3 gap defense. But when we played against them, our nose tackles had no gaps. Their job was to make sure that the guards didn't get up to the linebackers. And as defensive ends, we didn't have a gap. We had the dive play. We got our hands on the tackle and we had the dive play. And I just don't see schematically where we could have stopped that defense. I mean, a lot of time, yeah, he took off and we just took bad angles, or we missed tackles, or we just weren't physical enough. I mean, we just really honestly looked like amateurs playing against pros sometimes with some of the angles we were taking. But I really think it's something schematically that we need to address. If we're going to run this defense where we're going to be high pressure, we're going to be man outside, we still need to take into consideration that we have to stop a running quarterback. I mean, we're making average guys look really good running the ball. Jordan Travis, I mean, yeah, he had 100 yards the previous week. He's a good running quarterback, but if we know he's going to run the quarterback, why aren't we scheming to stop that? If we know that they're running the ball, if their running back is averaging 100 yards a game, why aren't we scheming to stop that? Last week, we looked all world. I mean, the game plan looked great. We played with physicality. We weren't missing tackles, but we're also playing for bragging rights. So, I mean, what's really important to this team? Does this team just want to be the best team in the triangle area, or do they really want to kind of take it to the next level and be a perennial ACC powerhouse, which is what we were promised when the staff came into town? And just like Mike said, I'm not one that's calling for a coaching staff's head, because at the end of the day, that coaching staff can only impart so much. And at the end, it becomes a point where the players have to take it amongst themselves and do what the coaches are telling them. I think that's where the change came for us in the transition from going from Coach Bunning to going to Coach Davis. That first year, yeah, it was a little bit different because we had some better talent coming into town. But you saw 2008, 2009, 2010, those teams became so much better because they started to buy in. Guys like Mike, who were redshirt freshmen basically when Coach Davis got there, these guys are now redshirt seniors. So they're carrying over everything that's going on in the program, the attitude, the buying in, and it just doesn't seem like this is I think the fans are a lot more bought into what Mac Brown is bringing than the players. And that's not a fact or something I know, but from the product I'm seeing on the field, that's the only assumption that I think I can make from that.
Yeah, schematically, it's something like if you give a quarterback who's as athletic as Jordan Travis that step, he has the ability to make somebody look silly if you're getting over there late. And Carolina had 11 missed tackles, but it's more so that they weren't even there initially to try to make the tackle, and Jordan Travis is just running in a lot of open field. But also schematically, I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you saw it, so that's why I'm also bringing it up. There was a 3rd and 12, and Carolina, they dropped 300-pounder Clyde Pinder, the pass rush specialist, back into coverage. What? Can you take me schematically? Maybe what's the thought process there, but behind dropping somebody like Clyde Pinder, who's coming into the game to rush the quarterback? What's the thought process dropping him into coverage for his lone snap of the game?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's to get it on film and to show the NFL that this guy actually can backpedal a little bit, but it doesn't accomplish anything. We had a couple of plays where we would drop Cam Thomas back. Cam dropped back once in practice and he said, "This feels wrong." I mean, he said, "This doesn't feel like anything I should be doing. Moving backwards is very unnatural for a defensive lineman." And the thing is, I was watching the game and on the TV copy, I realized that they showed highlights from my senior year in 2009 where Florida State came back to beat us. And the one play they showed was a play where I was actually playing stand-up outside linebacker and an exotic, schemy, let's be cute play this defense, where I was supposed to be out in the flat and Charles Brown was supposed to be basically playing a deep safety. Well, he's not used to this exotic defense, so he was coming up when we were playing the same area. Next thing you know, it's over the top. We lose that game 30-27. So I think a lot of times, I think defensive coordinators are out scheming themselves. I mean, why would you take a guy like Clyde Pinder or Raymond Vahasik or any of the big Hoyas of defensive linemen we have and drop him into coverage? What does that help? Even if they get the interception, there's no return happening. It's like when I was little, like when guys over 100 pounds couldn't play ball, couldn't catch the ball or run the ball in little league. It's like if you got a fumble recovery or interception, you just have to take a knee and give yourself up. That's basically what you get if Clyde Pinder even deflects a pass or get an interception. So no, let's rush the guys who are supposed to rush and let the guys who study coverage in the game plan in that aspect cover, which are linebackers in the secondary. So not a fan of that guy dropping back.
That was the moment of the game where it felt like I was getting punked. 3rd and 12. I'm like, maybe the Carolina defense gets off the field, get back in this game with a score. And then I saw Clyde Pinder dropping back into coverage, and I was like, oh, something's got to be off here. Maybe that's not Clyde Pinder. Double checking the roster, and then they complete the pass anyways on the sideline, the one that they reviewed for the first down. Drive continues. Florida State scores. Mike, the biggest issue for the Carolina offense on Saturday, I thought it's the wide receivers not named Josh Downs. Outside of Downs, the people that are listed on the roster as receivers, so not Kamari Morales or Garrett Walton or even Bryson Nesbitt, they combined for 2 catches for 14 yards. You get a lack of production from Emory Simmons and Anton Green. You turn to somebody like Joffrey Brown. He has another drop, a critical drop, where instead of the drive continuing, you're forced to punt. You have somebody like Justin Olsen. I think Justin Olsen played 13 snaps, was one of the early targets for a deep ball, incomplete. When you're looking at this, when you're looking at Saturday's game, how worrying is it that it's 6 games in, and outside of Josh Downs, the production from the receivers has been next to non-existent?
Well, it worries me because what's going to end up happening is someone's going to figure out how to take Josh Downs out of the game plan. And I'm not sure how Florida State was unable to do that at this point, 6 games in. They got 5 games of film to watch where Josh Downs was clearly the only weapon that we had, in the receiver room. But they somehow were not able to bottle that kid up and keep him from getting over 100 yards receiving again and another touchdown again. And maybe that's just a testament to Josh Downs and how good he really is. I'm sure there is a focus on him in the defensive game plan for every team that we play. At least there should be. And he's still managing to get his stats. And he's still getting open, and he's still a legitimate option for Sam. But at some point, he's going to get taken away. And right now we look bad with him getting open and with him padding the stat book and with him scoring touchdowns and catching a ton of balls and racking up a ton of receiving yards. How bad are we going to look when a team completely neutralizes him? Like, what's that going to look like? We're not going to be able to lean on the run game like we could last year. We don't have another option on the outside, someone that can try and pick up the slack. It's not like where we have De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome. And if one guy's having an off day or he's been taken away, that we can just go to the other guy and he's as reliable as he was, as the other guy would be. And you can do this, this give and take, game with our receivers. We just don't have that. And you're seeing that. I'll go back to how this is affecting Sam getting hit in the pocket and how he's holding the ball. Part of the reason why he's holding the ball is that nobody's getting open. So when Josh isn't available, that's always his number one read. And when Josh isn't available, he's got nowhere to throw that football. So he's just hanging on to it because he's a gamer and he's playing hero ball like you talked about earlier. He's trying to make plays, okay? Because he feels like he has to, because right now he is the whole offense. Him and Josh Downs are the entire offense. So when he doesn't have an option somewhere, he's holding the ball, looking, and then he's getting smoked back in the pocket, or he's taken off and now he's out in the open field and he's getting sandwiched between two guys, as he's getting tackled right at the marker, that kind of thing. So it has a trickle down effect. The inability to find another viable option on the outside at receiver is having a trickle down effect in a very negative way on the rest of the offense, all the way down to the quarterback standing in the pocket. We've got to find someone. I mean, I've said this before, but I mean, what we're missing is Bo Corrales. And I don't know this to be true at all, but I mean, from what I'm seeing, I'd be surprised if Bo plays this year. And I feel for that kid, but also he's a huge part of our offense when he's out there on the field. Even when he's 50%, he's a 50% Bo Corrales is better than no Bo Corrales. Yeah. And we haven't had him for 2 years now. And we've needed him for 2 years. We definitely need him this year. So I feel for Sam not having that option. I feel for Josh Downs having to carry that load. But at some point, guys like Anton Green, Chaffrey, Emery Simmons, they're getting their opportunity. Olsen, they're getting their opportunities. You're going to have to start making good on it. Kamari Morales is. So they're going to have to figure it out, because there's going to be somebody coming up on this team. Either they're in high school now and they're going to sign with us next year, or they're on the roster and we just don't know about it yet. But they're going to come in and they're going to take one of those jobs, and they're going to be because there's somebody there is a number 2 option on this roster. We just don't know who it is yet. And if it's not the guys who are rolling out on the field, it's somebody deeper on the roster or somebody who's not on the roster yet. But that guy's coming. So these guys that are getting their reps now, they better figure it out quick, or someone's going to be real upset hitting that transfer portal.
Yeah, and when you talk about how it should come of teams being able to figure out how to at least contain Josh Downs and make somebody else try to beat you. I think the best example of that is the 2016 UNC team, where Mac Hollins goes down in the Miami game, and then defensive coordinators all of a sudden, they're like, all we have to do is just bracket coverage Ryan Switzer, and the offense is going to be a lot less efficient. And then I think a lot of Carolina fans that year were like, what's going on? Why did this team kind of all of a sudden fall off? And that's why the offense kind of fell off, because defenses started to realize there's not too many guys on this team that can beat you, like you were seeing right now for this Carolina team, where not too many guys are going to beat you outside of a Josh Downs. And there's a lot of similarities between the two teams when you have a quarterback like Mitch Trubisky, like Sam Howell. There's a ton of talent. And then the other point you kind of made with Bo Corrales that I wanted to hit on was that Bo is people kind of underestimated how big a loss Bo was, because Bo has proved he's a good player in practices, and he's proved that he's a good player in games, and Sam Howell trusts him to where even if Anton Green or Emery Simmons are open at this point, like you mentioned, Josh Downs is his first read. If Josh Downs isn't open, the clock in Sam Howell's head is going off. I have to take off. I'm not even going to look elsewhere down the field, because when in the times he has tried to go to Anton Green or he has tried to go to Emery Simmons, he targeted Emery Simmons 4 times that game for 1 catch, 7 yards. Anton Green had 1 catch, 7 yards. So even when he is targeting them, they're not making plays. So when you do film review later and all of a sudden you're like, oh, Anton was open or Emery was open. In Sam's mind, he's like, whenever I have looked towards them, they're not open. I'm not going to them. I can't go to them because that trust isn't there between the receivers and the quarterback, because that trust it's built in practices. And then once that first game hits, if you're not producing, the quarterback's thinking I have to go to somebody else because I have to do my job and I have to a lot of this loss is going to go on me if we don't win. And
none of that is like, I should clarify here. I'm not criticizing any of those guys individually. What it is identification of an opportunity for them.
Yeah.
Like there is a void that needs to be filled here, and they have the opportunity to be that guy or those guys, plural. Like they all have a role, and there's a way for all of them to be wildly successful in this offense. And Josh Downs can still get 125 yards receiving and a touchdown every game. And they can all still be, the rest of those guys can all be wildly successful. And this offense could be wildly successful for the next 6 weeks. There is an opportunity there. And I just hope that one or all of them figure out a way, or some number in between, figure out a way to take advantage of that opportunity. Because I will tell you this, college football is fun. It's a whole lot more fun when you're on the field. And it's even more fun when you're playing well on the field.
Yeah.
These guys have an opportunity to really take advantage of their college career and leave with something, and leave this school with a feeling of accomplishment. And it starts right now. They have the opportunity. They're being given the chance. And I hope that at some point it clicks. It will for one of them. I don't know who it's going to be. You will see it click at some point before the end of the season for one of those guys. I hope it clicks for all of them. And I hope they're able to all capitalize on that opportunity.
Yeah. And I also wonder, how much different this season would be playing out if Carolina had hit on some of the deep shots it took against Virginia Tech, if Emery Simmons comes down with a big catch or Anton Green comes in with a big catch. Because I think going into week 1, the confidence was there from Sam Howell. When you have a good spring, a good summer, throwing to guys like Emery Simmons and Anton Green, and it's kind of like what I was saying before. Once the production isn't matching in the games, no matter what you're doing in practice, that quarterback doesn't have the trust to go to you, and it's kind of throwing off all that kind of timing. But Mike, you mentioned that if it's not going to be a starter now, it could be one of the guys on the roster or a recruit coming in. Is it concerning at all that the younger receivers like J.J. Jones, Kobe Paysor, Gavin Blackwell, younger receivers, true freshmen who came in highly recruited, aren't getting an opportunity right now when you have had this little production from the older players?
I think, and I say I think because I am speculating, I'm not in that building, but if I'm Mac Brown or if I'm Phil Longo, if I'm coaching this offense, at this point, I don't want to mess with Sam Howell any more than he's already being messed with. So I want to throw any more variables at him. I don't want him having to adjust to anything else, anything new. I want him to be able to have the confidence to know that I'm rolling out on the field. These are the guys who are going to be on the field. I know what I have to do in order to, outside of Josh Downs, I know what I have to do in order to make sure these guys are productive, or at least put them in a position to be productive. Okay. I don't want, as a coach, to put any unknown quantities on the field with Sam right now, because he's doing so much. There's clearly a timing, trust issue going on between the quarterback and his receivers. A lot of it's offensive line based. Okay. But it's also receivers not getting open, things like that. So I don't want to create any more confusion or throw any more variables out there than I need to. I want to try and keep things from this point forward as consistent as humanly possible and roll with the guys that I have. That is a longer way of saying I'm putting this passing game into survival mode. is what I'm doing. I'm maintaining the status quo in hopes that what we have will be productive enough to get us over the hump, get us into a bowl game, win us a few more games, knock off NC State, hopefully. At this point, that should be the biggest goal of the year. I mean, I'm saying, like, looking down that schedule at that state game after Thanksgiving, like that should be, we want to be in a position to be able to win that game, win a couple more along the way, get into a bowl game, save face this season somewhat, a little bit, kind of. And in order to do that, I got to maintain the status quo on offense, particularly in the passing game. And in order to do that, I can't go throwing in new faces. Now, if things start looking real bad, and it looks like we're not, this season might be a lost cause, which we'll know after about 2 or 3 more games. At that point, you might start seeing some of those younger guys coming in. You might start seeing them getting game reps. We are far enough out that if a couple of those guys play, and meaning there's enough season left, that if a couple of those guys play and they're playing well, I got to start them for the next 5 games. Now I've blown their red shirt, and they didn't get a full season out of them. So they're essentially getting 3.5 seasons if they stay through their senior year, as opposed to they get 4 games before I blow their red shirt. I would be willing to bet if you do see new faces, you'll start seeing them in the back third of the season. So beginning week 9, you're going to see them weeks 9, 10, 11, 12, so that they don't go blowing red shirts for guys that they'd like to have around for an extra year. I think that's probably the strategy you'll see.
Yeah, that redshirting is a good point. And I think, kind of like you mentioned, for a receiver to go from not getting any first team reps, it's an extremely tough challenge to all of a sudden put him in with a new quarterback. Like, if somebody like JJ Jones, if you had a Criswell or Drake May, somebody who he was more comfortable going with, the guys that you're practicing with all the time, and you can understand, how fast they are, where they like the ball being thrown, that's something that's kind of like a completely different conversation. I think plugging in new guys at receiver is one of the most challenging places you could plug somebody in and kind of expect results to be there right away. But EJ, along the same lines, when the defense looks this bad, the fan's turning to the person next to him and saying, it can't be that bad to get some young guys reps. And defensively, it's a bit different because a lot of those guys are playing special teams, so their redshirt year is gone anyways. Dilworth, he plays 1 snap. We mentioned Clyde Pinder playing 1 snap. Dante Balfour is another guy that people have been talking about. He's gotten 0 snaps in the secondary. Could help out at the safety position where you've had some of those coverage lapses. At some point, if you're a defensive coordinator, do you have to at least see what these guys can do in game action and not do the it could get worse when the product out there is already pretty bad?
I think defensively it's a little bit different. I think that with some of the issues that we're having, I don't think putting someone else in there is going to make it any better, because if we're taking bad angles, if we're missing tackles, if we're getting schemed into quarterbacks gashing us for runs, putting younger guys in there who are probably going to be, I don't care if you're a 4-star or if you're a 1-star, you're going to be a little shell shocked when you start getting your first time. So I don't think that you put those young guys in there and start burning their red shirts, especially guys that you plan on seeing in the future in your program. If you have enough for a 2 or 3 deep right now, you pull those guys to the side, and when you're doing your game plan and coaching, then you bring those guys in, because that's what's really going to be important to them, to really tackle the mental aspect of it. And that's what's going to keep them engaged throughout the season as well. If you have these guys saying, look, I want you to learn from what you're seeing right now. This is the exact thing that we don't want to see on the field, or this is not an angle that you should take. And then they in turn become coaches. So even if they're not no, if they're not getting a lot of playing time, even if they're not dressed out on the sideline, when the defensive lineman, when the linebackers, when the secondary comes off the field, these guys who aren't playing, who've been engaged with the game plan, who've been engaged with watching film and preparing just like they were starters, they're going to be coming off and giving people tips. So that's kind of one of the things I mean when I say that I don't think there's a lot of development on the defense in the defensive unit, because I think that was the biggest step that we made, definitely as a defensive unit and definitely as a team, when we had the coaches switch from Coach Bunning to Coach Davis, is that we from the level of guys who know that they're redshirting, they're invested in the game plan as you can be when you're giving scout looks. But when they're engaged in the game, they're seeing what we're doing, they're seeing the mistakes we're making, and they're seeing the things that the offense are doing that maybe we haven't prepared for, and they're giving tips on the sideline. I mean, for me, those are guys like Quentin Coples, Michael McAdoo, and Tydreek Powell, and some of those guys. They're engaged in the game. I mean, there have been games where I know, especially guys like Tydreek, who's one of the best guys, one of my favorite teammates of all time. He'll have just as much fun as we did. He may play 10 snaps that game, but if he's engaged and he's giving us tips that we're then going out there and using, he's just as happy as he was if he had went in there and gotten a sack. So I think that's the next step for this program, and I don't want to see us burning these guys red shirt, because I do think, like Coach Brown said, a lot of the talent on our team obviously is not a lot in the field, but it's our freshmen and our sophomores and guys that we still need to develop. So I wouldn't burn those red shirts, because I mean, you can have a guy who may have sat on the bench his whole year and come out as a senior his only year as a starter. It could be a first-round draft pick or an All-American. I've seen that happen. I've had teammates that's happened to. So no, I wouldn't burn those red shirts as early, but because I think schematically some of the things that we're doing are very good, but if you're going to take a terrible angle, if you're not going to follow through and tackle the way that the coaches are teaching you to tackle, and these are your starters, the guy that you trust to be your starters,
inexperience isn't going to, you're not going to be able to put inexperience out there and it look better.
Exactly. And then you're just burning red shirts and burning time where these guys could be getting better. So no, I don't think that we should start throwing those younger guys out there just to throw them out there.
All right, everybody's favorite part of the podcast. It's Say Something Nice. It's a bit challenging this week. EJ, we'll start with you. What is your Say Something Nice?
Say something nice is that at least this week we know that we're going against a quarterback who can run the ball, who's more than capable of getting 150 yards. So I hope the coaching staff is coaching up. So my Say Something Nice, and I've searched and thought about this since yesterday when I left Top of the Hill. The only thing I can say nice is that we know we're playing a quarterback who has historically been one of the better rushers in the country. So hopefully we can stop them. My only positive is going to be moving forward, because I mean, I hate to say this, and I usually try to be the optimistic guy, but there's nothing that I can take positive from that game last night. I mean, we had personal foul penalties. Actually, I mean, at the end of the game, they're down in the ball. We cause a whole commotion. Like that's not Carolina football. That's not the respectable way to win. So I'm acting like last night didn't happen, and hopefully that we'll prepare accordingly for the task at hand next Saturday.
Yeah, and I think De'Aaron King he's questionable for Saturday's game. The backup played against Virginia, Tyler Van Dyke. He was a freshman. He completed 15 of 29 passes for 203 yards in the loss. So you could probably just triple those numbers knowing what's
I was going to say quadruple, but positivity pod.
Mike, I strayed away for a little there. What's your Say Something Nice?
Miami is, like Virginia Tech, has become a rivalry game. You know, it's a back and forth series. It's a home game. We've seen some electricity under Mac Brown against Miami in Chapel Hill. Mm-hmm. And we've had some really good games against Miami, some pretty electric, fun games over the years, against Miami in Chapel Hill. And, maybe we'll come out and we'll all be pleasantly surprised. I will say this, and I mean this. I'm not fabricating this positivity point. We're going to find out real fast how much pride this team has after they watch this film today, and how they come out to practice this week and how they show up on Saturday.
Mhm.
If this team that shows up on Saturday against Miami blows the doors off Miami, or at least plays, even in a loss, plays insanely hard, plays mistake-free football, and does everything and controls all the things that they can control and puts together a complete game, then we know this team has the fire and the spark that I've said I didn't see yesterday. That we know this team can learn from its mistakes and that they care, and they are more than capable of doing the things that we expected them to do all season long. So the positive point here is, just like there's an opportunity in that receiving group, there's an opportunity for this team to come out this weekend and wash this Florida State taste out of their mouth against a good Miami team and get a good win on a season where there hasn't been a whole lot of good. They can start to turn that around a little bit and maybe make something out of the second half of the season.
Yeah. My say something nice is that I got this from Mac Brown, where in losses, you can't just jump and say, everybody was bad, because it kind of does diminish the players that did put together a great performance. Somebody could have their best game of their career, and you talk about everybody playing bad, and all of a sudden they're kind of starting to doubt, like, did I have a bad game too? And certainly players did play good for Carolina on Saturday, despite the result. And one of the players, he puts on a show every Saturday, Josh Downs, through 6 games. He has 49 catches, 741 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's averaging 123 and a half yards per game. And it's really unbelievable what he's doing at the receiver position. Knowing that defenses are coming into every game trying to say, where is 11? Let's try to stop him. Let's try to limit him. And so far, no matter what you throw at him, he's been making plays all over the field. Sam clearly trusts him, and it's starting to get to the point where almost halfway through the season, the chances of the Biletnikoff Award coming back to Chapel Hill is a real possibility. I know there's a receiver at USC, Drake London, who's also pretty good. So I would be surprised if it isn't one of those two with the numbers they're putting up. And anytime you could win a Biletnikoff Award, Carolina's never done it. It's a huge award for college football for the receivers. And if somebody like Josh Downs wins that becomes a huge recruiting point, saying like, the best receiver in college football this year played for Carolina. So that's something I think that could help out Lonnie Galloway even further when you're recruiting these wide receivers. And I know they're in it for a couple of big wide receivers, and seeing the production that Josh Downs has. And also I think Kamari Morales, he deserves a shout out. He's becoming a real good red zone threat, 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. And it's an offense that has been pretty unpredictable this year, and more bad than good, especially in terms of expectations coming in. But I think Morales and Downs have kind of been the guys, along with Sam Howell, of course, for this offense. But Carolina back in action on Saturday. It's another home game in Kenan Stadium with the U coming to town. I'm looking forward to seeing Josh Downs scoring a touchdown. I'm hoping somebody throws the U down. I need that on Saturday, just for my own morale. Carolina is a 7-point favorite. Makes me a little nervous. 7-point favorite, but it's a 3:30 kickoff again. Guys, always a pleasure.
Yeah, man.